Hello everyone, welcome to the first event of GLF Season 2, Taking Green Lit to Kids, Indie Book Clubs and Libraries. So at GLF, we believe that all the lasting change in the world begins by getting children to read. And in a world that is beset by climate change and anxiety, probably there's no better time to have them reading green literature. But how does one get this literature to the children? To answer that question, this year we are going to be doing a deep dive into outreach and have planned a series of panel discussions on taking green books to children. And I'm so happy at this first panel discussion that has 4 incredible reading champs with their book clubs and libraries who are getting children to read. I'll begin with Ruchi. Ruchi Dhona started with a high-flying corporate career, and then she gave it all up to begin to found children's libraries all the way in Spiti Valley in Himachal Pradesh. Then we have Archana Tree, who revolutionized book clubs in Delhi NCR by opening one of the first book clubs in that part of Delhi, and AA's Book Nerds, and she was with us last year as the moderator for the children's jury at the Green Literature Festival. Then we have Sudeshna. Sudeshna is partner and co-founder at Cozy Nook Library in Bangalore, which also is, by the way, just for the audience to know, India's largest English books market. Sudeshna, am I right?
I think so, yeah.
And apart from that, she is also one of the most experienced children's publishers in India. And currently she is the publisher at Talking Cup, which is the children's imprint at Speaking Tiger. Sudeshna's list includes Vijay Vacharajani's highly acclaimed A Cloud Called Bhura that was on the GLF shortlist last year. And finally, our moderator, Harshika Udasi. Harshika has been going places with her Book Trotters Club that began in Mumbai 8 years ago. And since then, it has been to Deolali, it's been to Pune, and next it's headed to Ahmedabad. For the last 3 years, Harshika was also the library educator at Akshara High School in Mumbai. And now she's going to be heading content and communications at Ahmedabad University. So with that, I'm going to hand over this panel to Harshika, and thank you so much to all the panelists and all the audience members who've made time to join us today. Harshika?
Thank you, Megha. Thank you very much. I think that was a really warm welcome to all of us, including me, who's going to be the moderator today. And I'm really happy that I've got a chance to interact with such wonderful women from the children's book fraternity. And we're all going to discuss this very important aspect of writing and reading, which is green lit. I think really 1 hour is quite a lot, but never enough when you're discussing books. So I'm going to dig deep right into the context of what we're going to talk today. And with that, I'm going to go to Archana first. Archana, when I was off social media for a while, so when I did really start getting back, there was something that did not miss my eye, and Green Reads was all over the place. So what is Green Reads about? What is this baby that you've been working on? Why don't you just clue us in, and then we start our discussion? Actually, you're on mute. Could you unmute yourself?
Yeah, okay. So I've been thinking of, getting all the book clubs on a common platform for a while. And when this, with the new year, I said, let's look at something now and let's work on that now. And then when I was a part of, the Greenlit Fest, and I was talking to the children in the children's jury, that's the time I thought, hey, why not? Let's take this forward a bit and work on it. So then I just got in touch with the book clubs and the libraries in different cities. And I said, would you guys like to join in? And immediately all of them said, yeah, great, let's go ahead. So yeah, so that was quite exciting. So then I said, okay, then let's look at, Green Reads. So there was this whole thing about what exactly is Green Reads, and, what does it mean to each one of you? And I said, just your interpretation of whatever it means in the context of the environment, ecology, biodiversity, flora, fauna, whatever you interpret it as. And even the books, I said, look, how you handle it is all your own. What books you want to do, what, etc. And the library people said, listen, we don't have a book club. I said, doesn't matter. You are still, you are guiding reading choices. And while not directing them, but you are guiding them and saying, look, these are good books. Why don't you look at it? Or these are good. So then the indie libraries also got in. So that's how it began with, looking at, and I just felt that since I'd already worked with the children's jury and looked at the Green Literature Festival, that I'd like to shadow some of the books that were done there with my book club kids. So that's how then we all just got together, the other book clubs, the other indie libraries, indie book clubs, and we worked on Green Reads, which is really exciting.
What a lovely outreach initiative. Wouldn't you agree, Sudeshna? I mean, so you bring in a double perspective as a publisher, as an indie book person yourself. So could you just tell us a little more? Is it a challenge to kind of push green books out there? And as a library yourself, do you see that you have to, even when when children come in to borrow books, is it something that you really to kind of hard sell to them, or does it come naturally?
Uh, in terms of publishing, no, I don't think we need to really hard sell it to our sales guys or marketing guys to say that, we should do these books, because at least in the children's space, I think there is plenty of interest in books on environment, on nature, on all of that. So that I've never faced that. At least in my career, I've never faced any of that. And whatever books I have worked on in this area, I feel they have pretty much, done quite well. So I'm books that were published quite a while back are still in print, or new ones are still coming out. So on the whole, I don't think it's that big a challenge, because as a publisher, what you look at is the content. So if the story is good, if you're convinced about the story, then or the way it is presented, then it works. When it comes to kids, giving the books to kids, what I found is that fiction of usually works better. Like, it's sometimes pretty hard to get kids to pick up non-fiction, especially at the library. I mean, I don't know, maybe their parents get it for them, so they read it at home or something. Because as a publisher, I know that these books are being sold, like someone is buying them.
Right.
At the library, where we have a fair amount of non-fiction books, um, uh, we find that at times there is a challenge, and especially if the books are for a little older kids, like even if the
Okay.
books are for younger kids, or that they are non-fiction, then that's fine. But that is one thing. But on the whole, I think it's not that difficult if we sort of present the book to them as something that's really interesting to read. I think that's
Okay.
always the main criteria for them, whether this is fun. And then you always have these kids who are, like at 7, 8, they've done their PhDs on dogs and cats and various other tigers and whatever. So there are kids who will not read anything else. They want just that. So then your job is pretty easy.
Okay, that's very interesting, because early on, in fact, a couple of times, Megha and I have had this conversation, how there seems to be an obvious bias against non-fiction. At the school level, possibly not, because schools tend to stock non-fiction books, but when it comes to individual families coming and buying in, they tend to buy fiction a little more. So what do you say, Archana, about this? Do you think that happens at your club as well?
So, see, it depends on what you're saying. In fact, with my kids, I mean, what is nonfiction? Is an autobiography of somebody who's sitting in a wheelchair and has gone for the Paralympics and won that. That's also nonfiction, right? And I must tell you, my nerds always, if I put out, I mean, even when we were reading books on disability, the ones they picked out were the real stories. And that's what they said, that that's what we identify with. It's always, I've seen that. Or even Rohan's book on snakes. So it is a mix of fiction and non-fiction, but the idea is to communicate information, right? Okay. So especially in the context of the environment and, green reads, I just felt that, yeah, I think non-fiction has to be focused on, or even, 10 Indian champions. Again, the kids so identified with it because the environment, the stories, the fiction will develop that kind of empathy. But you need hard facts. You need to know what went wrong, what is happening, what we can do. So yeah, so there is, in addition to the empathy, you need, I mean, when you're talking about other matters, when you're talking about discrimination in various ways, or, women's issues, etc., you can look at stories. But in the context of the environment, particularly, I feel both, yes, but non-fiction particularly is
more so.
Yeah.
What an interesting time to get Ruchi in, because Ruchi and I was speaking a little earlier today, and she mentioned this thing about how there is definitely a gap for these children at City Valley, where she's taken her libraries. Ruchi, why don't you come in and tell us a little about your pet project there?
Sure. So I've set up like a community library in Spiti, which operates during the summer months. And then together with that, I also work with the government schools there to set up small reading corners there. So I actually want to specifically talk about this one project that I piloted last year, because Spiti is a very unique geography where a lot of researchers and scientists will come to study the environment. They'll come to study the rare species of animals and birds that are found there. There are a lot of journals there, like a lot of research papers about Spiti that are published in journals. But it's very interesting because there seems to be little or no information that's available publicly for the people of Spiti, especially the children who are there. So last year, I wanted to kind of address this particular thing, and because it's such a huge subject area, I decided, okay, you know what, let's just start small. So maybe let's only look at birds, because you actually find more information about birds. There are a lot of books there, both fiction and non-fiction. So the little project that I piloted was about getting children to be familiar with birds in Spiti. Now, the interesting thing is there is absolutely no children's literature available about birds of Spiti. So then the question is, how do you approach a subject like this, right? Also, in my experience, what I found is that a lot of times, kind of agreeing with Sudeshna a little bit here, that children will have a tendency to come into the library and so if you ask them what do you want, they'll be like, "Hame story ki books chahiye." Right. So the interesting thing is I want them to have fiction, but I also want them to have non-fiction, because the idea is to also kind of get them to be aware about what's going on around them, right? So I curated a set of books. Also, I don't want to present, like, say, Birds of Spiti to them as like a subject area or something that they need to learn about, but doing so in a more kind of fun and engaging way. So I curated a set of books which included both fiction and non-fiction. Now, every time I'm looking at a book that I want to kind of sit and talk to the kids about, I'm looking also in terms of what kind of conversations will it lead to. So if I pick up one particular book, it's obviously picked very deliberately to talk about a certain thing. Like there's this one book by ANA, which is kind of a translation of a European children's picture book. It's called Panchita, which talks about how there can be this really beautiful relationship between humans and birds, and how it's kind of part of everyday life and not something separately. So we talked about books like those. We picked up the book from Tulika, which is to basically introduce children to the idea, hey, there are people who kind of study birds, it's a thing, right? So just looking at it from different angles, but at the same time also introducing them to non-fiction and saying, okay, you realize what the idea is, but hey, can we talk about it a little bit more? I've seen the books will work, or the non-fiction books will also work, like Sudeshna said, if you have thought about how to present it to the kids in a way that they think is fun and engaging. So yes, Jyoti, that is Salima. Thank you. I couldn't remember the name. So what I realized is that these books, all of these books worked wonderfully just because we're able to sit about them and unpack them with the kids and say, hey, what do you think about this? And so on and so forth. And then these sessions were kind of followed by field visits, and there were art sessions that we did to kind of bring it all together in a way that's actually fun and engaging. Now, the critical gap here, which I've been trying to do something about or kind of thinking about, is that, like I said, there is no literature available about, hey, what are actually the birds that are there in Spiti, which can be digested by the kids in a way like by themselves, right? So they need an adult to come and sit with them and talk about different things. And now the information that I pulled out had to be done from a bunch of books instead of me saying, okay, hey, these are the 2, 3, 4, 5 books that we can look at. So the struggle is kind of picking up bits and pieces from a lot of different books.
And just getting it together for the children.
Yeah.
Okay. You got me to 2 interesting points there, Ruchi. One is, of course, we are reading in English right now, but are there books, in other languages? And then how easy or difficult, challenging is it to kind of get translations of books?
Yeah.
Let's say, if I'm talking about animals or birds, like you said, then a certain bird may be a different, word in Hindi, in Marathi, in, Kannada. So how do you handle something like that? I'll jump over to Sudeshna for that.
Yeah.
See, the only books that I've worked with very closely, which are in different languages, would be the Pratham books, and I feel that they are a wonderful resource in their whole range of subjects that they deal with, and the more recent books that they've been doing over the last few years, which deal with environment, climate change, the built environment around kids, urban kids. And all of that. So, and they also deal with very slightly difficult subjects, but in a very interesting way. One book that I found, which is beautiful, is Matangi Subramaniam's Butterfly Smile, which talks about immigration. And at the same time, it talks about how butterflies also migrate. So that is where I've seen that a lot of the translated works seem to work, because it's just a really nice way that they have told. Most of them have a nice story, or the way they have, even if it's a STEM book or a non-fiction book, the way they have presented it. Other than that, I have actually not worked with a lot of books in that particular languages. Like I have worked on translations that we've done, but I don't think we've done a lot of translations which look at green subjects. As in, I can't think of any off the top of my head.
Possibly, what I remember Megha and I were discussing, that when it comes to a translation of, like, for example, a family of animals, and there is a particular scientific name for it.
Yeah.
So this is a challenge. How do you do that? So she was telling me that there was one particular book she really, really wanted to get translated, and in multiple languages, and everybody just put up their hands and said, how do we do this? There is no way. How do we do it? And she mentioned that there was one Telugu translator somewhere who said, I'll look up this book, and there is somebody in the taxonomy institute that I could get a book from, or some reference point where I could actually put in some effort and work on this translation. I think that's a definite challenge, isn't it?
It's a big
challenge.
We're
losing out on a lot of readers.
Yeah. Also, the knowing what is available out there, because we are such a diverse country, and there are so many languages and so many literatures out there, that also knowing what is out there, to be like there might be just a wonderful book that we're just not aware of. Yeah, which is a real shame. And like what Ruchi was saying, that if that book had been available in that language and with that content, that localized content, that it would have made her life so much easier, because she is trying to bring that world to her kids. Yeah.
And such a vast difference to the children there.
Yes.
Learning about it, making it relatable,
It makes
right?
a big difference when the kids read about stuff that is around them. It's you can see that their entire relationship with the text changes when they see that, this is something that I know, this is something that, I don't have to struggle to understand.
Completely. And the other thing that Ruchi brought up was, taking children after the reading of the book, taking them out for a field trip or an art program or something related to make it a complete experience for them, and then help them kind of relate to the environment, not just read the book. Archana has something to say about this. I know very strong views. Yes, Archana.
So while I'm it has to be books for the children, and while I do host a book club, and that's how I began, but I do feel that we have to take what we've read out into the real world. We have to. So I have been doing that with my nerds over the last 11 years. So if we are, talking about accessibility, when we read Harshika's book, if we are talking about accessibility in, for people who are in wheelchairs, etc., then we wrote out a letter, went to the RWA, etc. So the idea is basically to take what you're reading and to act upon it. So similarly, even with green literature, unfortunately, because of the pandemic, one is not able to, but particularly with green literature, one is reading it and the other is going out into the field. Okay. My problem there is, I was just thinking about this also and talking to somebody else about it, is, we're living in our condos. We have our sanitized environment. We are in our AC homes, AC bus, AC school, AC mall, back home. And when we're in the car, we have our headphones and we have our gadgets. So what is our environment? What is it that we are? So when the children were reading Unearthed, for instance, from that itself, they picked out what was relevant to them in the context of what the world they are living in. So they were looking at the computer and the power saving devices or whatever, which they did not know about. So one of them read about it, looked it up, and then shared it on the group with the others. Or, for children, these are very big steps that, okay, I will write on both sides of the paper. But in terms of, pesticides use, we don't have cockroaches in our homes because of the use of pesticides. We don't have lizards because of the use of pesticides. So it's such a sanitized environment vis-a-vis somebody who's in Chennai or even in Bombay when they're out on the beach, etc. Here you're going for a holiday, you see the farmers striking and you talk about it and say, okay, this is happening. But really at home, what is happening for the child in a different, wherever they are, it varies. And yeah, I do feel that you have to get them to move out of, get what they've got from the book out into the real world, because that's where they'll really carry it here. Otherwise, book padha band kara,
And that's that. And that's that.
Yeah.
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 So Ruchi, why don't you tell us a little about when you're reading in, Spiti Valley? For a person who's living in the cities, Spiti Valley is a very remote location where, there may not even be internet is a far off thing, maybe mobile networks, maybe missing in places, right? So when you read to these children there or read with these children, what's the response you see over there? Generally to books and to green books.
Right. So generally to books, I think it always starts from either the parents or the children themselves saying, oh, but mera bacha padhta nahi hai. And the kids are like, we're not so sure. But what I've seen is the kids take to books very, very quickly. Like if you are able to have just a few conversations with them where you're just sitting down, just reading out to them, or just even simple things like telling them, oh, by the way, I've read this book and it's really cool, I think. So they're like, oh, like, acha, aapne padhi hai. So, that thing that, oh, someone else has actually read it and they think it's nice and interesting. So I've realized they very quickly will get into reading. Some of the kids started off last year, like they started off with saying, oh, no, I don't like reading books. And then within a matter of like 2 months, this kid had read like over 150 picture books. So that happens quickly. But also I think it's because the distractions are still relatively lower right now. So like, of course, there's a problem with electricity. There is a problem with the internet network. Like internet network just came in like maybe a year ago, like that. So all of those things make a difference. So response to books is like over a period of time, I've just seen them like, reading a lot. To green books, again, I'll keep coming back to this pilot project because that is where I made like a more kind of conscious effort to introduce them to literature like this. For me, I think what really worked was starting the conversation with setting the ground and saying, hey, you know, birds are not something you have to see in isolation. So, hey, let's read about this story where, okay, you know, this is the role that birds played in an elderly couple's lives. Or saying that, hey, it's okay if you're not into bird watching, it's completely fine. You don't really have to be an expert to be able to read and enjoy this kind of literature. And once we did the field trip, the interesting thing that happened is the kids started going for little bird watching trips on their own. So they would go, they would, so I did the field trip in collaboration with NCF, which is Nature Conservation Foundation. They have their intervention in Spiti. So I spoke to the folks there. So they were actually real bird experts who came down to conduct like this field trip. And they were talking to the kids, and they had like proper equipment. So they had binoculars, they had the know-how of how to do it. They had little leaflets which had information about birds. Now, the good part was because the kids had already been oriented to the subject a little bit before the field trip, it was kind of win-win for both parties. So the people who came to conduct were like really happy because they're like, oh my God, these kids are really interested. And the kids were like, oh wow, like it is a subject that I actually know something about. So after the field trip, the kids would go out into the fields and say, oh, you know, I saw this bird and I saw that bird. And the art workshop came after that. So this is when the kids have already kind of built like sort of a frame of reference from which to see the birds. And then they started noticing different aspects, or like, you know, the physical attributes, saying, oh, iski chonch lambi hai, ya, it's a small bird, it's a yellow bird, things like that. So when they came to the art sessions, they already had all of these things at the back of their head. So these are not then isolated activities, but kind of like, you know, fitting into each other. So that is when there were kids who started coming in and borrowing like these really thick field guides that I had about birds, which I cannot imagine them picking up on a usual day, because they would be like, ye to bade logo ki book hai, hum nahi padhenge. So the response has been like, in my experience in Spiti, it actually has been great.
What lovely anecdote there. No, Sudeshna, this just gives us even more encouragement to go ahead and publish a lot more books.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Especially green literature.
Yeah, if I can add something over here, because so Cosinuk is also has we are 3 libraries. So 2 are in sort of upscale areas, kind of a thing. There's one which is a community library, and that sort of caters to kids in a community which is pretty underserved in terms of access to books. There are schools, but the schools really don't have libraries over there. I mean, even if they are private schools. So these kids, we started hanging out with these kids before the pandemic in 2019. And we would like a pop-up library. We would go there and we would read them, take books and read to them. And then the pandemic happened and all that stopped. And, you know, there was this utter mayhem in the kids' lives. So there was like, they were really not in a place to be really studying or whatever. So after things have sort of become better, we've started a library in that community over there. And so over here, the thing is that these kids live in a very, very urban, concrete kind of an area where if you look around, there is not even a tree to be seen. Where the main points of concern are things like access to water or cleanliness or garbage, you know, things like that. So those are also things that, you know, they think about a lot. And those are things that also need to be addressed in a lot of books in terms of how do kids who are in this kind of an urban area, how do they perceive their world? And that also needs to be presented in books. And there was this one picture that I was showing Megha earlier. If I can share that one. Can I share that?
Please do.
Yeah, so this is a picture, that was our last session at this reading center before, in March 2020, before the pandemic happened. And that's my partner Radhika. She was reading Ruskin Bond's story, The Cherry Tree, to these kids. So I don't know, like if you know the story, it's about a boy and his grandfather who plant seed, cherry seed, and then how the tree grows and what happens to the tree and how the boy grows with it and all of that. So these, I mean, if you look at the faces of these kids, because I mean, they had no idea, I mean, what a mountain is, like they barely know, like, you know, the Himalayas, and we had to explain it to them where exactly the Himalayas are. But you know, you see the power of the story in front of you, the way they're listening to her. And as the story progresses and things happen to the tree and it gets cut down, and that whole, you know, entire range of emotion happens to them. So which is why I'm saying that, you know, yeah, that if you, I mean, books are a way to get so many things alive to kids who may have not even thought about it, or may have thought about it but don't know what to do with those thoughts. So yeah, that's just something that
starters completely.
Yeah.
Okay. No, so that's, you know, I mean, the best part I think about this panel is that, you know, Sudeshna is talking about these 3 libraries that she runs, one, 2 in really urban centers. The other is also in an urban center, but in a very, what shall I say, concrete jungle, underprivileged, there's little or no access to, you know, good books except for the library. Ruchi is talking about her experience at Spiti Valley, and Archana and possibly I bring this experience from very urban centers. Do we see a certain bias when we are looking at, you know, urban kids reading? Like, you know, Bangalore, Megha mentioned earlier, is the largest English market, English readers market. And but at the same time, in this country, we have Kerala, which is, you know, a culturally rich place that has reading libraries or reading nooks at almost every corner. And there is Pustakanta Gao in Maharashtra itself, which is Dilar, a place that is a village of books. So why then this bias that, you know, in urban centers, children have access? Is it just that? And that's what sort of differentiates the children in urban libraries versus a remote library. What, Ruchi, would you like to step in? And then I'll call Archana for her views of the same.
I'm sorry, like I'm not completely sure. Can you just like help me understand a little bit more?
Yeah, so the thing is that, you know, children are the same everywhere, but we are sitting in an urban environment and having access to these books in an urban library or a book club, vis-a-vis children who are sitting in City Valley and they have one Ruchi doing this work for them, or maybe, you know, nobody working at their level. So why, what is this, you know, the differentiating factor, and is there a difference in response? So maybe we'll get your views and Archana's views, so we will put it together.
I'm not sure about that bit, honestly, because like, yes, it is true that inside of Spiti Valley, there's very little access to books, right? But I think it is not really the books that will, I mean, like, at least that is not where it will start. So I feel when a child is first coming into a library space, they're actually not looking for books. They're coming in the space to find somebody who's going to be there every day, someone they can talk to, and someone they can say that, hey, like, you know, I don't really want books, but can I come and hang out here, right? So I think that is where it starts, really. They're there because they feel like it's a safe space. I can go and I can sit, or I can just go and lie down one day if I'm not feeling so good. So I think that is where it starts, and that is where the conversations start. Later, it moves to books, and I think that is like really what we are doing, right? Like, we're trying to bridge that thing between a child coming to a space and then saying, hey, you know, have you tried reading this book? Or, you know, just talking to them to get the conversation started. So I'm not sure if it is just a matter of that. Like, example for green literature, like we're talking right now, and I was talking about the books about birds. There were a lot of books that were already there in the library. and the kids were picking it, not picking it, whatever. But the interest actually only started when we started a conversation in the library and say, hey, like, let's talk about this, or here's the book. So I think more like books are of course important, because otherwise we can't do anything. But I feel like they kind of come second to the children being able to come and be in the space to begin with.
Just the experience of being around
Yeah.
books and being around somebody whom they can trust. It's a
Yes.
lovely way to put it.
Yeah.
It's a safe space. Library as a safe space, yes.
Yeah.
Archana, what do you say? What distinguishes or differentiates, urban children reading versus children in a? Is there what shall I say? A reading culture that's different?
So actually, when Ruchi was saying it, and that's what I said, it's exactly the way it works in a home. It isn't as if the mom will tell the kid, "Chalo, betho, reading time." There too, the safe, happy space has to be created. Even in my book club, I have to, I mean, that's the whole thing. Even in a book club, you have to first get the child comfortable with you. Wherever, the moment you're told, no, 5 to 6 is your reading club time, rest assured the children will not. So I have to get them again. And there are times when a parent will tell me, she doesn't want to read. Why don't you work with her? So then we'll have things like, okay, let's play a word game today. And then what I do is, in the context of green reads, I did have a child who the mom said. So I said, okay, think of green words. Okay, both of you exchange your words and do your, write a story related to that. Then let's look at a book. So the safe space has to be, I mean, that's, I think, a given wherever you are, and so Ruchi, when she said that, I was thinking, yeah, that's a very important thing. So there is that, definitely. And then to, get them to start reading is not just me handing out books. It has to be, okay, let's look at the mood of the child. So if a child is talking about, just an experience they've had, and I'll say, okay, let's look at this. Or, for instance, with when there was the UN year for not, what was it, single-use plastics. So when there was that, I said, okay, let's look at, books related to this, and look at, so there were a lot of books on Pratham and otherwise also. Now, at that time, I took my nerds to a government school. Now there, so with my nerds, I was able to say, okay, we do not use plastics, we do not do this, that, whatever. But when I'm going there, for them, plastic is the cheapest. Either I provide each child there, a metal bottle, or I can't just say do not use plastics, because then the parents will come back and say, "Ji, bachcha to le hi nahi ja raha hai." So there is very clearly, or even my nerds, when they read, there was this fabulous book that we read called Boond Boond. And my nerds could not understand, they could not see that the children there are fighting for the water, for a drop of water, for the door, because they're in an area where the entire scene that's the illustrated, you make out that it's from like an urban village. Now the children could not identify that, they couldn't see it, because they were seeing the child and the dog, because that was, just, I don't know why. And I couldn't understand, why can't they identify where the story is located? So the environment for, as you're saying, in an urban jungle, what they're seeing and how much they're able to, step out of that, is that,
that's
for me
absolutely
is,
true, Archana.
yeah,
No, that's
that is
absolutely
what I
correct,
work
because
with. Yeah.
Sorry. No. So the thing is, yeah, absolutely correct, because, when you talk to children in an urban setup, they react very differently from the same. If you take the same book to another child who's possibly not had that kind of access to the kind of things that these children had.
Yeah.
But this concept of library as a safe space is very interesting, because I'd just like to take you back 2 years ago, when the pandemic had just sort of started, and there was a complete lockdown. And I mean, no space to go to, no, the school is a sense of belonging, no place to go to really. So how did your children react during that time, and did you do anything at all to kind of get them back in those few months? Was it a gradual process over the year? Because for me, I know it took me 2 months to get over it myself. So I'd like to kind of hear from you what you'd say. Sudeshna, how was it at the Cozy Nook Library?
Yeah, so we had actually just opened our second library in January
Yes, I
2020, and the lockdown happened in
remember.
March. So, and plus we had our community work going on as well. So with the community kids, we tried doing stuff on the phone, in terms of even teaching them on the phone, because they were out of school, they were not in touch with a lot of things. But the problem is that at that time there was such major chaos happening in their lives. Their parents were out of jobs, their, you know, their devices were sort of, either they didn't have, or they couldn't pay the whatever thing. So it was a really bad time for them. So that sort of kind of petered out till things became a little better and we could go back. But that was only last year, like in 21, that it was almost a year's gap before we could go back over there. And when we started the proper library over there. But what was heartening is that the day we went back, the kind of reception we got, it was like we were like royalty walking in over there, because it was like, auntie, you're back and you've got books, and you've got books over here for us. I mean, you don't have to wait for you to come with the books, and the books are here for us, and they can come anytime. And like in 2 years the kids had grown. They had, some of them had actually dropped out of school because the parents couldn't pay the fees, so they are doing like open school or something, but they're not in school. But they were there. They're still coming to the library, and they and then there is this whole bunch of new kids who are coming to the library now. So
Okay.
the sense of belonging towards the library is very strong. It's like, this is our library. And so Radhika and I, who run it, we are not always able to be there all the time when the library works. So there is a person from the community who runs it. She's called Vajita, and she does a wonderful job because she knows every kid over there. So she knows what's happening in their lives over there, which is very important in that sort of setup. And but when we go, it's like forever some child is pulling at us and say that, you know, you sit and you listen to me read, because, you know, or you tell me what this word means, or, you know, it's like that. So and they're pulling out books and they're reading, and, you know, that, like what Ruchi said about it being a safe space, because we told them that, look, we told Vajida, who runs it, that look, at no point, you know, ask them that, you know, okay, tell me what you read. What is this book about? Tell me about it. Nothing. If they just want to sit and look at the pictures, just that's enough, because these books are theirs. So it's not about, you know, how neatly everything is kept and all of that. For that, we are there. So that is there. With our other libraries, it was there was a tremendous clamor from the parents, actually, that please start the libraries as soon as you can, because how much of screen time can we you know, allow our kids? How much can they read on the Kindle? How many books can we buy on Amazon or wherever? So please open the library. So you know, we've opened the libraries, we've shut them when lockdowns have happened, but as soon as we've been able to, we open them. And all the time it's been like, if we meet the kids downstairs or wherever, if we meet them outside the library, it's always, you know, auntie, I'm coming to the library now. I'm just like, you know, as if we are there to just like, you know, listen to their reading updates. Yeah, so I mean, the kids who use libraries, I think they sort of instinctively understand the value that they bring to their lives. Maybe they don't think about it as much, but they definitely understand, and there is a definite emotional connect with that space.
There are a lot of librarians, independent librarians who have joined us, and a lot of book club people. I can see them all online with us. I think that's one thing that we are going to all take away from the conversation, right? That we never asked our children, what did you learn from this book?
Yeah.
Okay, that's amazing, Sudeshna. Let me go to Ruchi and figure out with her, how was it at Spiti Valley? Because, you know, I mean, how did the pandemic affect reading over there? And what did you do?
So the first year, what happened is that Spiti was completely shut to outsiders. Absolutely everything was under very, very severe lockdown. So like basically Spiti is kind of like, there are these small villages there, about like 70 or so, which is really kind of far away from each other. So I was told that not only could no one from the outside could travel back to Spiti, but also even within Spiti, people couldn't travel from village to village, and within villages, they were not allowed to go from house to house. It was that severe. So the first year, we couldn't get like, we could barely do anything. So
were you there? Were you within Spiti?
I wasn't because like technically being an outsider, I couldn't go into Spiti. So the first, at that point in time, we were primarily working working with government schools there. So I used to reach out to government schools, help them set up reading corners, talk to the teachers, train them to do read alouds and all of those things. So the first year that it happened, and the schools were shut, and it was such a severe lockdown. There was this one small window of like 4 to 5 days. That is when there's this one volunteer who is actually a Spitian local. She's based outside, but she was able to go back to her home. So we were able to talk to the district administration, and within that small window of like 4 to 5 days, she kind of really spearheaded the entire thing, and she took books to 4 to 5 government schools where we had these boxes, got the kids and the parents to come in, and we just distributed the books. Because you're like, don't worry about whether we'll be able to take it back, not take it back, whatever. Just take the books. And we know for a fact that once the books are in the hands of kids, they will find a way to exchange the books, right? So that's what we were counting on. So the first year, and also that was also the year when Spiti had almost no internet access. Most people did not have smartphones. Most villages still don't have phone networks. So we couldn't talk to teachers, and then we didn't know who to reach out, because the teachers would be based in some other villages, but the schools would be in different villages, and so on and so forth. So we were just hoping that just with the books that we send, the kids will have some reading material in their hands, right? The next year I was able to go back, but again, the same problem, right? The schools were still shut. Teachers were not coming in, and we didn't know how to reach the books. And that is how the community library actually came into effect, because I'm still trying to figure out, hey, how do we get books to the children? So even if I can't get books to children in 70 villages, can I just, and then I decided, okay, you know what, let's just do this little experiment and see how kids are responding to it. So that is how the community library came into existence like last year. So we rented like a small room in Spiti, and we had like almost no furniture, no nothing. There were just stacks of books piled on the floor, and the kids would come and pick books. But how it helped was that even though the schools were still shut, because the government decided to keep and I feel like in Himachal, things were a little bit stricter than rest of the country, because for the longest time, schools weren't operational. But the kids were there and they wanted things to do, but there was nothing happening. So as a result, the kids started dropping into the library. So like within a matter of a couple of months, we had like over 65 kids coming in. About 20 of them were coming every single day to either just sit at the library, or to come and attend a read aloud, or to do one of the workshops and all of that. So for me, it wasn't just about the response that I kind of received from the children, but it actually forced me to change the way I operate in Spiti. So, but yeah, going forward, I think I'm going to just stick with the community library, because it's just wonderful to be able to see kids in the space and talk to them and read to them.
I know it's addictive, isn't it?
It's addictive. We grow on it.
Yeah.
We feed on it. Archana, please share your experience, because you know that's one thing we wonder. What does a child in a city miss?
What does a child in a city miss is what you were talking about?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah. During the pandemic.
During the pandemic, so online classes are easier here. But yes, there was the thing about the physical, holding a book, getting a book, accessibility. So parents would ask me the same thing, that, we don't want a gadget. So I would try and say, okay, I'll get the books home. And then the children, so instead of stepping out, I'd get the books home, they'd come and pick them up from me and read them. But I had to work with the books differently. I had to take up books which were lighter and easier. And, that was definitely a case there with the pandemic and for the children. So, but on the whole, again, as I'm saying, an urban thing, they had the Wi-Fi, they had the internet, so they were getting books. But yes, what books we were reading, and the stress of being, they were locked in. So all those stresses were there, and we had to then look at books. And I would do a lot more of, pick up books online and tell them, okay, look at this link and open up these books. So we were looking at books which were a little lighter, easier, that
More
was
fun
there.
book.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Strangely, that's one feedback even I got from parents, that they'd rather do some fun books, this time. Let's just do fun books that kind of takes their mind off all this, because it was quite depressing that time when we were at the peak of the pandemic. So, but I think I conclude that book people are really magical people, even if I do say so myself. Look at the kind of work that look at the kind of work that's gone into sailing through a pandemic, getting them to read green literature. I think it's just wonderful. Also, interestingly, we have a really rich panel that brings about such diverse experience. So I really think that is my biggest takeaway from today's conversation about children in diverse environments. And what is environment? And ultimately, it's everything around us, right? It's something like the cosmos. It's all everything around us. The environment is also similarly like everything is around us. And so a lot of it depends on what we see around us. So I think Sudeshna rightly pointed out, it's not just about the birds and the animals. Of course, it's about harsh realities as well. So would you like to kind of say something about that, Ruchi? The harsh realities around the children. And I think children in the Spiti Valley, I'm sure they have their own share of fair share of harsh realities. Could you just elaborate a little more on that?
Sure. In fact, I'm glad you asked that, because that was the reason I decided to pick up this topic of kind of getting them to be to know more about the birds in Spiti. So Spiti had actually been closed to outsiders for the longest time, and it's only been like a couple of decades since the place has been opened up to the outsiders. Now, a couple of years ago, Lonely Planet kind of named Spiti as among the top 10 destinations in India. So since then, there has been such an increase in tourism there. So like the population of Spiti is like somewhere around 12 or 13,000 people. And the number of tourists visiting Spiti every year is like 40 to 50,000, which is like, at least these are the pre-COVID numbers, right? Now, interestingly, because the Spitians have had their own ways of living, right? Very, very rich in terms of understanding of the environment and living in harmony with the environment and all of that. Now, with the sudden influx of tourists coming into the valley every year, and also there's been change in the way children are getting their education. So they're going to the government schools. And of course, it is important for them to get all of this education, but there is nothing specific available which kind of prepares them to face challenges such as, oh, there's so many tourists coming into the valley. And while for a Spiti kid, it's very interesting, like, oh my God, who are these people? And they're really kind of, the glamour hits them, right? But also at the same time, it's very important for the children to understand how it is changing the valley itself, because so many tourists coming in also means there's a problem with waste disposal, or Spiti has always had like a water shortage, so which kind of gets complicated. There's construction everywhere. So for the locals and for the children, it's like, oh, there are tourists coming in, so which means there are more means of livelihood. There's practically like a hotel starting every corner of homestay. But just to understand, and Spiti is such a fragile ecosystem that unless the Spitians do something about it specifically, it's going to be a disaster over the next few years. Now, but then how do the children do something about the environment when they're not even aware of what the environment is? If a child does not know what kind of like, for example, what kind of animals or what kind of birds are there, and how all of this change kind of affects the ecosystem. If the child is not aware of that, then how do they even kind of do something about it? And that is where the idea was rooted, that that they have to start understanding and appreciate what they've got, for which the first step is just awareness. Once they know that, oh, this is what is there in our environment, then the next step is automatically, okay, what can we do about it? And I kind of saw that happening even during the workshop. So with the conversation, it was like, okay, what do you do if you see a bird lying down and if you think the bird is injured, for example? So most kids would be like, oh, I've had this experience where I took the bird home, but then and I tried to keep it warm and this and that, or I found an egg somewhere and I tried to keep it warm, but it didn't work. And you talk about, hey, like, it's great that you did that, but have you considered this? So sometime during the workshop, the kids actually found an injured bird. They didn't know what to do. So they took it to a person in Spiti who is known to have like a lot of love for animals and birds, took the bird to the guy and said, hey, can you help the bird somehow? We don't know how to help. So for me, that is the idea, for them to become more sensitive about what's going on in the environment, with the hope that when they grow up, they will think that these things are important, and that they start conversations around these.
Yeah, absolutely. And also actionable, right? Actionable work. So wonderfully said there, Ruchi. I am going to now open questions from the audience. So those who are watching us, listening in, please do let us know if you have. Okay, Divan, how can I join these sessions? I suppose we put up links on the Green Literature Festival on Facebook page, I think on their Facebook page, so you can join these sessions, Divan. So if you have any specific question for our panelists, please put them up right now so we can just, okay.
Can I just make one point, which I was saying when Ruchi was talking? We have, so where the ecosystem and, what is your ecosystem? And that's what one nerd pointed out, that, we are looking at, there's the marine life and there's what's happening here and there. But when we are crossing the DND and going to Delhi and we're looking at our Yamuna, we are not talking about the way that river is polluted. We're, so also looking at your own environment around you. And another very, when the children are thinking and all, another important point again in terms of what they're exposed to. So when we read Seed Savers, one of the children's, what was their take? We're not planting in that sense, but there was this immediate thing about hybrid. And then they start saying, my mother orders hybrid cucumber. I will tell her not to order hybrid cucumber or whatever they are. So that's what was their take from, so I found that very interesting in the context of what Ruchi was saying, that what is your, what are you exposed to through your
right?
books?
No, that's an absolute, that's a point completely. So, so the children take away their own things, I mean, what they want to understand, and also when they sort of put it in their context, wherever they are, whether they are in city, they're in Bangalore, in Gurgaon, Bombay, wherever they are, okay, and in other places as well. Okay, Vivan, just to answer your question, GLF, Green Literature Festival, is on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. So yes, you can join these sessions. You can be aware of when these sessions are happening next, if you will see them there. How are digital children books doing? Is Benedict is asking us this question. I think, Sudeshna, if you could help us, how are digital children books doing? Also, is it helping? I think Archana did mention that she used digital content during the pandemic, but maybe Sudeshna can throw some light on that.
Yeah, that's definitely something a lot of people have turned to much more over the last couple of years because of limited access to bookstores and libraries and supply of books and easy availability of getting these. But we've also seen, I don't know whether it's just us or maybe it's something Archana's also faced, that after a lot of online school and a lot of digital life happening on screen and all of that, a lot of kids are actually pretty much ready to not do that when it comes to reading. They would rather pick up a physical book and they would rather turn the pages, and even the parents, I think a lot of them feel that way. That's what my personal thing is. But in terms of our books being available online, yes, definitely, I think there has been an uptick in that across publishers in all areas, not just children's, but even for adults.
And I must point out to that, the other day we were reading some Pulika book, And I said, look, we haven't got enough copies of this. So one girl promptly, 10-year-old promptly goes online and says, I'll check, there might be a PDF available somewhere. And she's going cut, because they've just had to, because of pandemic, just look for books online.
Okay, sorry. So I said they just become so good at going and searching there, so you don't even have to help them, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so Pooja is asking us if all your read alouds and book clubs are digital at present, then how do people reach out to you and join and attend? So Archana?
So as, I mean, Harshika, even you have yours. So it is online, but I prefer to always go on ground, because that kind of engagement is so essential. So I am taking a few kids online, but that's where we are talking about book clubs. Open up more book clubs, because really I've seen that the kind of engagement that there is there, it's a safe space. Children are around. It's not a school environment, so it isn't as if you have to read the book. You can say what you please. And I keep telling my kids that all the time. You're not taking a test. This is not an exam. There are no right answers. So that's why we need more book clubs. And I think storytellers and others who are working in the kidlit space, who are in any case interacting with, so the person asking the question, look at on-ground book clubs, make your own.
Absolutely, and I think there's a bit of peer learning that happens there. When you're sitting with your friends and reading a book, so there's so much to share and take away from that. So I think that really helps. We have one more question. I think we can. How do we get to know the best of the books to be read out to kids, or give them to read those books? Okay, okay, Ruchi. How do you actually curate the books? How do you go ahead and pick out books? Wow.
I feel like we're gonna need like another panel for this discussion. But in a nutshell, I wish I had a golden rule. I do not. And so I read a whole lot of books to be able to figure out. But it's not like there are these, oh my God, these are the best books and these are not so great books, because for every single child, the book that they like and relate to and enjoy can be very different from the others. So I don't think I can ever say, okay, yeah, you know what, these are the 100 books that every library should have. No. So you have to know the kids you're working with. You have to really know what's out there, and not just know like as a one-time thing, but you have to constantly read and upgrade your own understanding of the space. So you have to do these things. So there is no shortcut, I guess.
That's absolutely true. That's absolutely true. I mean, you just have to read a lot of books, right? Okay. How do you begin a book club or a library? Sudeshna, you want to take that? Because, well, you're wearing the double hat there.
I think
there are a lot of people wanting to hear, who want to hear that.
Well, I can talk about a library. It's something I tell a lot of people, that it's actually incredibly easy to start a library. If you are sure of the space, if you have a space, and you don't need a lot of space, actually, it's not like you need a whole house to start a library. You need a room, or like maybe even two walls dedicated to books. And good thing about children's books is that you can fit in a lot of them in a small amount of space. So yeah, it's actually, if you set your mind to it, it's not that difficult. The what people think will be the difficult part, which is the space and the books and this, all of that, cupboards, shelves, that actually that's very easy. I mean, if you can, find a way, because when we started Cozy Nook, none of us had any idea about libraries as such. I mean, I came from publishing, my partner was a teacher, but we had never had a library as such. But, because we just reached out to a lot of people, including people in publishing and, book distributors and booksellers and all of that. And yeah, actually we found that people are very, happy to help when it comes to that. So in terms of getting discounts, in terms of, telling you, giving books or, giving store credits or all that kind of thing. The slightly more difficult part is getting kids, getting not kids, but getting parents to get their kids to the library. That is a bit of a challenge sometimes, because in terms of for them to see the value of it, and especially as the kids grow older. So then it's like we just had someone pull out their kid from one of our libraries because he's in the 8th, and he has to go for tuition now because he has to start preparing for engineering entrance. So the poor kid is in the 8th. So those challenges are always there. But
No, that's absolutely true.
it's something that can definitely be overcome. And especially in a community setup, it's, yeah, Ruchi.
Sorry. I was just wanting to add to my previous response, because I know for people who are just starting out with a library or book club, it can be very intimidating and not knowing which books to begin with. So there are a few like great books lists available. Like, for example, there's Parag Honor List that you can go to, and there are a lot of these lists. So if you're somebody who hasn't had like much exposure to children's literature, maybe that's a place to start. But yeah, nothing beats like reading the books yourself.
Yeah, and like you said, just take a room and put your books there. Yes, Archana, I was just about to come to you because yes.
No, just in the context of again, in terms of how do you decide what books to read or themes, etc. The Green Reads was perfect. All schools have projects related to the environment. All the parents were very enthused. Yes, Green Reads. Okay, this book, already the children are making out their charts. They're okay, I'm going to focus on this. I'm going to focus on this. So it worked very well. But yeah, we have to, when we are getting parents in, we have to use the USP. Isse school mein marks padenge. And it does. No, actually, I have seen that the moment the child is reading, it depends also on how, it's not just reading, that kind of the analytical skills that come with what you're reading. I mean, even with Green Reads, for instance, the way they were focusing within their own spaces, the way they were focusing on how, oh yeah, this makes sense. Yeah, okay. So Bhura, for instance, one child said that, oh, I loved it because it had a lot of information on Bhura and the other two, roots and which one was it? There was one on roots and there's one on trees. There were these two books, Traveling Seeds,
Traveling Seeds.
And yeah, and the other one on trees or roots. I've forgotten the name. They were on the short list. Okay. And those two books, again, they were just like, oh, they have so much of information, but they're not a boring encyclopedia.
Right.
So, and Bhura was, okay, this is the action we can take in the context of the environment. This is something we can look at. So I guess that also, what the book club is doing is also very important. And which is why when I was telling the librarians, I said, you can guide them to what they're reading. And that's what parents are quite happy. Acha, okay, this will work well. So
I think what we are all trying to say is that yes, the books definitely matter. It depends on how you have picked up a particular book for a particular child, or how that child has picked up that book for himself or herself, right?
Just one thing, and in terms of a library, is the role of the librarian. That is actually, I think, of utmost importance, because it's not just a matter of getting the books, but it's also about how you keep the books, how you present the books to the kids, how you interact with the kids, how do the kids relate to both the space and you. So the librarian, I mean, like none of us have any formal training in being a librarian, but it comes from sort of hanging out with your people and knowing what they want.
And Sudeshna, people know who the librarian is. Does anybody know what a book club is? Aap karte kya ho? Can you imagine when we are going with a book club? That's the bigger thing. A librarian is a very legit.
Yeah, that's true.
Book club people are magic, like I say. So we are magicians, right? And we stand at that. Okay. So on that, I think on that wonderful note, we shall say bye to all our panelists. Thank you very much for your time. And thank you for all people. They've always been, engaging with us. And I think Haripriya really answered your question about how difficult it is for us to convince parents that reading can be transformational. And she was like, okay, that's it, bingo. And she got a bingo moment over there. And everybody has been so engaging. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And thank you, Ruchi, Sudeshna,
Thank you,
Archana, for
Archika.
being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Megha.
To all of you for being part of this panel. A YouTube, I think it's going to go up on YouTube. So anybody who has missed it can watch it later as well. One of those things about living in a post-pandemic world. But that was the most enlightening session. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Harshika, for moderating so well. And to everyone else for being part of this panel and all the, I think we never thought of some of the things that were discussed in this panel about taking books to children who, in a country as diverse as India, are just so differently placed from each other. And, from Spiti to Bangalore, how some of those things really pan out when books are actually taken to children. So it's not just like a very, how I'd like to say, sometimes you're accused of being publishers in ivory towers, taking books. It gives you that on the field, sense of books, but really most enlightening. Thank you, everyone. And thank you to everyone who joined in. I know there were Shifali and Haripriya and Ramendra Kumar, and I can just go on. There's a very, very long list of people who, I mean, not a very long list, but a fairly long list of people I know working in children's, within this field. So really, thank you to all of you for joining in. And see you on another panel next month. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you
so
very
much.
much. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Archika.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.